What's going on, everybody? It's your boy C-Zar, and we are talking about Bitcoin today. It's the 11th day of January, and here we are sitting at about $91,000 with roughly 9 hours left in the day. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's get into it. Before we get into the TA, I want to talk a little bit about history. Right, this is a very historic day, the 11th of January. On the 11th here in 2024, this was the very first day that we had a Bitcoin ETF listing in the United States. I think that's important to mention because we had ETFs list for Bitcoin in the prior cycle. We actually did have ETFs listing before, whoops, that's not what I meant to do. Before we put in our last cycle high. I think there was like 2 or 3 from different countries. But it doesn't matter if there's an ETF listing. What matters is the availability for financial institutions and for old money to on-ramp into crypto, right? That's the reason why people were excited about this ETF, because this wasn't an ETF promoted by a small country. This was promoted by the United States. This was listed by the United States, which is the largest economy in the world. There's going to be more people who benefit from the access, the on-ramp capabilities of that to get into crypto, right? Old money, traditional money that might not have dabbled in crypto otherwise. That's why it's a big deal. I'm making a point out of that because not any ETF matters, right? It matters, and it's not that it doesn't matter. The very first Bitcoin ETF or ETP matters. It definitely does, but it matters more or even most when the largest economy has one, right? When the largest economy in the world has one. That's whenever it matters most. And when we had the very first ETF for gold with the United States. I think it was somewhere around, is it November 18th, November 8th, 2004, something like that around here, I want to say. We moved sideways. We basically moved sideways for a whole year. It wasn't really until like August of 2005 that we started to move up. And then we went on an explosive run, absolutely explosive for gold. But first, after the ETF listed, we moved sideways. Silver, whenever its ETF listed, it was the 28th of April. We moved sideways for a very long time, and then we moved up. How long do we move sideways for? We moved sideways from the 6th of April. We didn't see higher prices than this. I'm sorry, the 28th of April, 2006, until November 2007, like a year and a half later. And it wasn't until August of 2007, about a year and 4 months later, that you actually started to rally. Right? Sideways for a very long time. That's what the ETF brought. A little bit of a downturn initially, maybe a little bit of a pump technically initially, and then a bit of a downturn, but really just sideways, right? Copper, same thing, except a little different. You moved sideways. You did have an initial surge, right? You kind of moved sideways for a few months. You had an initial surge, but you basically moved sideways for years before breaking down. Having an ETF doesn't mean you will break out to the upside. It doesn't mean that, but typically what it seems to mean is that you will move sideways afterwards, right? Bitcoin did not move sideways. We had January 11th as our ETF day for listing in the United States. We moved up, and then we moved sideways for a very long time, and then we moved up. And I'm wondering, and then if you notice these two, as time goes on, I mean, these rallies, they only get bigger and bigger and more. I mean, you go through like a super cycle here with gold, and I'm assuming we'll see similar things with Bitcoin, but the rallies before the ETF were pipsqueak compared to the rallies that we got after the ETF listing. So I do think the ETF listing overall is very positive for crypto and positive for the price action, but in the short term it probably caused a little bit of mayhem, and that could have been, if this listed in 2024, that could have been why 2025 was such a dud boring year, right? It could have been that could have explained some of it, because typically you do see boring times with commodities for a year or multiple years after an ETF listing. But after that time has gone by, that's when we really see these commodities start to cut loose the goose, and they really start to run to the upside. My thoughts are, and just with that long intro, is that, being now that today marks the 2-year anniversary that we've had an ETF listing for Bitcoin, I think that we've had a very boring time in the markets. Maybe I shouldn't say boring, but exciting. Exciting at times, depressing at times. It's a real throw of your emotions, all just to move sideways for a very long time, for about a year and a month, a year and a couple of months there. I think we're set up to move higher. That's my expectation. I think the rally that we're going to see between now and the end of this year will be far more exceptional than what we saw in the beginning phases of this cycle, or even this latest part of this cycle. We're going to move up at a pace that we haven't seen in a very long time, because at this point now it's been 2 years. The institutions have had time to onboard. They've had time to get things straight and set themselves up. The supply is being sucked up, and whenever that supply shock comes in, I don't know. I'm expecting we will move at a much faster pace. Everything moved up over the past year. Crypto did not. And I think the ETF institutional involvement probably has something to do with it. And of course the shenanigans that happen with Binance and Wintermute and basically every major exchange in the world for crypto. But I digress. I want to get into the TA. I just wanted to give you guys some things to think about first, but hit that like button, subscribe. Let's really get into the TA now. I'm excited for 2026. I'm excited for the coming years, especially. And I really do believe, I know it's a meme, I know it's a bit of a joke, but I don't know, man. I'm really starting to believe that we could see a super cycle for Bitcoin. A super cycle. We talked a little bit about this. Shout out to Rob Mass, Shook Focus, and Ruel Black. Shout out to you guys. We were talking about this a little bit on the Blockchain Buzz episode that I was in yesterday with Crypto Future. That's his crypto show, the Blockchain Buzz. It's fun, man. I had a really good time, by the way. Whoa, I got distracted. What was I just saying? Oh yeah, talking about the super cycle. Super cycles don't necessarily mean that you're moving up at this pace the whole time, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that you're moving up at this pace the whole time. Super cycle just implies that you're moving up and you don't really have a bear market, right? Like this here, this was a super cycle. Were you moving up the whole time? I mean, we can look back and pretend like we were, right? We can pretend like from the low of 2001 to the high here in 2011, you just moved up for a straight 10 years and that was it, and it was a super cycle, right? That's the point, right? It's not this for 10 years. It's a long time frame of just consistent growth. But you're not really seeing that exponential parabolic blow off top. There's moments where you do, but even here, 2006 until 2007, this was May 2006 till July of 2007, you consolidated. You consolidated here for a very long time. You weren't moving up the whole time in a straight line. So that's the point that I'm trying to make. There were periods where for a year you were stagnant, you were boring. There were periods for a year where you were stagnant, you were boring, but you still moved up over time. Super cycles are more about the time length rather than the explosive price behavior, though you would expect with a long amount of time of growth that you would see price growing at very high rates as well. But that's how it is. If you're going to grow a lot in a short amount of time, you're not going to have a very long bull market. But if you take your time to build over time, you'll have a longer cycle, healthier corrections, shorter corrections overall, less dramatic bear markets, if not a complete absence of bear markets, and continue to grow. We really could be in some type of super cycle with Bitcoin. In which case, things will only heat up from here, and things will continue to grow. And we could be moving, I mean, this market could continue to grow well into 2027 or even later. I mean, it's completely possible. But I digress. I'm getting way ahead of myself. Here we are at $90,800 right now with 8 hours and 40 minutes left in the day. Consolidating here at the base of our drop, right, from our all-time highs. We've got this nice ascending triangle look, and we have a complete absence of volume. Volume has died off entirely. So we are waiting for a breakout, likely to the upside, not to the downside. If we do break out to the downside and volume starts to come in, starts to back that up, we will talk about the downside. I don't think that it's worth talking about because I don't think it's going to happen. But I mean, if we do go lower, we would likely go down to 70K, or at least 74K. But I wouldn't think that we do at this point. We move up from here. Likely, where we're going to go is somewhere around 110 to 106K, somewhere around there. I don't expect that we'll stop here. There are reasons why we could stop right here, right? There's prior support right here. Closing and wicking support. There's prior support right here. It's in the same exact area. Our 50-week moving average, I believe, is actually right up in this area as well. Do I have that on there? No. Here, I can put it on real quick just so we can see. Get that, and then we'll change it to the 50. Yeah. It's all in this same area. That right there is at about 101, 102K. So it's all in that same little kind of area right where we found this consolidation just before we dropped on our final descent here. It is possible that we find resistance here. But I think, personally, I think we're going to disrespect the hell out of the 50-week. I think we're going to close above it. And again, the thought here is that we're going to break above this very obvious area of resistance. And that's going to generate FOMO in people, right? A lot of people in this crypto market, myself included, were very bullish on Bitcoin throughout this whole area, that we would go up higher, that we'd be pushing on to 200K, 180K, 160K, whatever the price may be, but higher, right? And then like clockwork, instantly, once we closed below the 50-week moving average, that's whenever everybody became bearish and started saying bear market. And then we stopped moving down. Then we started moving sideways for about 6 weeks or 7 weeks, however long it's been now. I don't expect, we didn't show any respect to the 50 on the way down. I don't expect we're going to show any respect on it on the way up. There are a lot of people, myself included, who are expecting us to bounce here, and we didn't. There's going to be a lot of people who are expecting us to reject here, and I don't think that we will. If we do, we can go over that then, and then, we would flip bearish probably around these same prices, maybe a little bit higher. I wouldn't be bearish at the absolute top because I am expecting us to break through, but we would flip bearish before we take out this low, should that happen. We'll be apprehensive to the charts. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if we broke through this, or maybe we find a little turbulence for a time, but then break through it still inevitably. And the next logical target area to go to on the weekly time frame here would be somewhere around here, which is roughly 108K. 110, 106K, somewhere in that area, that's where I think we're going to go. But 108K certainly is appealing. We take the all-time high to the low of November 21st, and our golden ratio zone is directly there. It's right there. 108K is literally right in the middle of our white zone, the golden ratio zone. So that's where I think we're going to go. I don't really have a whole lot else that I want to say. I feel like we've talked a lot today. It is Sunday. Things are getting a little bit more exciting. We're seeing some volume come in a little bit. That's nice. Not a whole lot going on, though. We moved sideways and we were boring because it was Saturday. Sunday, if things go the way that I'm expecting them to, Sunday should be a good day. We should see some green today. The 4-hour stochastics, the MACD, the RSI all suggest so, that we would continue to grow. The daily time frame, this is a perfect area to bounce. We're crossing back up on our stochastics. The MACD has crossed above the 0. The RSI got overbought. Now we're bouncing off the 50. Hell, we even pulled back and bounced off the 50-day moving average here, an area that we did show respect on as resistance. Now we're showing respect on as support. And the 50-day moving average itself is also starting to curl up. You can see this here. This is actually starting to curl up. Something about moving averages, and not all of them, okay? Not financial advice, not a financial advisor, but when they change their slope, those focal points there, whenever they change their slope, that is typically a signal too, right? We think of EMAs or SMAs, we think of them as just lines to respect. You either respect them as support or resistance, whatever, but there's more to it than just that. The angle, the slope, that matters too. It typically does, right? Here, whenever we started to slope down, right here, you're starting to lose your slope. It's not as vibrant, but you're still positive slope, right? Still positive slope, so you're still growing. Here, you get a negative slope. Whoa, things change. The momentum literally shifts. We go sideways, and then that negative slope persists, and we come down. When you have a positive slope, it's easier to find support at or just below this level. When you have a negative slope, it's easier to find resistance at or just above this level. It's something to consider. And the slope of this trend line, or of this simple moving average, this SMA, is sloping up right now. It's starting to slope up. And we're above it, and we just found support on it. That's positive in itself, let alone all the other indicators looking good here. So I do expect today and this week to be positive. I do expect that we will continue to grow, and I do expect that we will be above $95,000 over the coming days. If not, even above $100,000 by the end of this week. We'll see. Not by the end of this week, like right now. This week only has 8 hours left in it. But by the end of the coming week. Hit the like button, subscribe. Thank you all for being here. I'll see you on the next one, okay? Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.